Here are 5 reasons why you should never spend a day with a blind musician. Welcome to my channel. I'm your host. Every day is guaranteed to be filled with surprises when you're hanging out with a blind person. You'll never know what you're going to walk into. The first thing you learn when you hang out with someone who's blind is that they live in a completely different world. This can be very difficult for sighted people to wrap their minds around, but it's true. There's so much more to the world than just sight. For instance, when you meet someone new, you look at their face to get a sense of who they are. You notice their smile, their eyes, maybe even their scars or birthmarks. But when someone is blind, they can't do that. Instead, they have to rely on other senses to get a read on the person they're talking to. They might listen to the tone of their voice, the way they smell, or even the way they sound when they speak. Because when you talk to a blind person, you will learn that they pay attention to every little detail, even things that we sighted folks don't even think about. One time when I was hanging out with a friend who's blind, he was talking about how he could tell right away when someone was lying to him based on the way their voice sounded. He said he could hear it in the tone of their voice or the way they hesitated before they spoke. It was amazing to me how much he could tell just from listening. It made me realize how little I trust my own eyes sometimes. That is one of the many lessons you'll learn when you spend a day with a blind musician. Music is such an important part of our lives. It can be the soundtrack to our favorite memories and help us through tough times. But for blind musicians, music is more than just a hobby or a career. It's a way of life. When you spend a day with a blind musician, you'll see this firsthand. They approach music differently than anyone else. And you'll learn that they can teach you a lot about the world and yourself. In fact, when you spend a day with a blind musician, you'll realize that they're some of the most passionate and dedicated people in the world. They have to be, because music is more than just something they love. It's something they need. So if you ever get the chance to spend a day with a blind musician, take it. You won't regret it. You'll learn a lot about music and life, and you'll make a friend for life. When you spend a day with a blind musician, you'll also learn that they're just like you and me. Despite our differences, we all have the same hopes, dreams, and fears. And music is a universal language that brings us together. It doesn't matter if you can see or not. If you have a passion for music, you have something in common with blind musicians. I remember when I was hanging out with a blind friend of mine, and he was playing his guitar. We were just talking and having a good time when suddenly he stopped playing. He looked over at me and said, "Do you ever feel like there's just too much pain in the world?" I was taken aback by his question, but I eventually told him that, yeah, sometimes I feel that way. He nodded his head in understanding, and then he started playing his guitar again. It was the saddest song I'd ever heard. And I realized that even though he couldn't see the tears in my eyes, he could feel my pain through my voice. That's the thing about music. It has a way of cutting through all the superficial stuff and getting to the heart of what it means to be human. And blind musicians are masters at using music to express themselves and connect with others. You'll also learn that being blind isn't always easy. There are a lot of challenges that blind people face that we sighted folks do and even think about. For instance, one time when I was hanging out with a friend who's blind, he was telling me how hard it was to find a job. He said that most employers are afraid to hire someone who's blind because they think they are not capable of doing the work. But he assured me that given the chance, blind people can do anything. In fact, he said that sometimes blind people are better at certain jobs than sighted people because they have to rely on their other senses, which makes them more aware of their surroundings. He also said that blind people are often more creative and resourceful because they have to be. When you're blind, you can't just rely on the fact that things will work out. You have to make things happen. And that's why blind people are often successful at jobs that require creativity and problem-solving skills. And finally, when you spend a day with a blind musician, you'll learn that they're some of the bravest people in the world. It takes a lot of courage to live a life without sight, but blind people do it every day. They face their fears and challenges head-on, and they never give up. And if you spend enough time with them, you'll catch their courage and realize that you're stronger than you think. There are so many misconceptions about blindness. And you'll get to clear some of those up when you spend a day with a blind musician. For instance, you'll learn that blind people aren't always experts at using other senses. Just because we can't see doesn't mean we're great at hearing, smelling, or feeling things. In fact, sometimes our other senses can be just as impaired as our vision. One time when I was hanging out with a friend who's blind, he was telling me how hard it was to navigate through airports. He said that the loud noises and crowds made it really difficult for him to figure out where he was going. He ended up getting lost a lot, and it was frustrating for him. Another thing you'll learn is that blind people aren't always experts at using long white canes or guide dogs. These tools are helpful, but they're not magic wands. Sometimes they're not enough to prevent accidents or injuries. In fact, one time when I was hanging out with a friend who's blind, he was telling me how he had recently been hit by a car while he was crossing the street with his cane. He wasn't hurt badly, but it was a close call. He said that drivers need to be aware of their surroundings and be prepared to stop for pedestrians, especially when they're in a crosswalk. Another misconception you'll clear up is that blind people aren't always experts at Braille. Braille is a tactile system of reading and writing that's used by blind and visually impaired people. But it's not the only way that blind people read. In fact, many blind people read with their ears. Talking books and audio players are popular among blind people, and some blind people even read with their fingers. They trace the letters of the alphabet with their fingertips on a keyboard or Braille display. So if you ever get the chance to spend a day with a blind musician, take it. You'll learn a lot about blindness and the misconceptions that surround it. You'll also learn that blind people are just like you and me. They're individuals with unique experiences and perspectives on the world. And that's what makes spending a day with a blind musician so special. You get to see the world through their eyes, or rather through their ears and heart. So what are some of the lessons you've learned from blind musicians? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.